Hey everybody, welcome back to my back porch. The lost ancient civilization theory has gained a lot of notoriety and traction over the past couple of decades due to the work of notable figures such as the big boy Graham Hancock and Brian Forrester and the late John Anthony West. Now, this theory isn't universally dismissed by professional archaeologists. However, the academic community as a whole does tend to dismiss it and challenge it. Now, personally, I'm on board with this because it does make sense. And the crux of this is just in a nutshell there was a civilization during the Ice Age within the last 15 to 20,000 years that had achieved, agriculture, urban centers. They were seafaring and possibly had a global reach. They had settlements around the world. And about 14,000 years ago, they suffered the global cataclysm known as the Younger Dryas event. The current theory is that it was a celestial strike, and it very short order melted the ice caps and ended the Ice Age. And because of that, millions of square miles of land were lost due to the rising sea levels, plus the meltwater just gouged out huge parts of North America. So the academic community likes to challenge this by saying, well, there's no physical evidence that this civilization existed. Well, two things. One, if a lot of the land is completely covered and inexplorable, you're not going to find much of anything. And secondly, if you don't know what you're looking at, you probably would not realize it's from a previous culture. So Graham and the other researchers have done their research and taken myths and legends from around the world that match very similar from the time period across cultures that supposedly never had any contact with each other. There's also similarities in architectural styles. Agriculture seemed to have cropped up around the same time worldwide recently, and there's just some hallmarks that could be the remnants that some knowledge was passed from a previous civilization and kind of jump-started the modern civilization. Now, as far as I said, you don't know what you're looking at. Some of these architectural wonders that the researchers like to point out, and rightly so, are things like Ollantaytambo and Sacsayhuaman in Peru, which is these giant megalithic andesite blocks that are perfectly cut, not even in cubes, but polygonally, 12, 8 sides fit together absolutely perfectly in a way that makes the Great Pyramid look like a cakewalk to construct. And clearly, the Incans did not have the technology to do this as far as we can find in the archaeological record. Now, to add on top of that, when the conquistadors showed up with the Inca, they asked them how they built these things, and the Inca said, we didn't do it. It was already here. So if you imagine you have a civilization that's wiped out, but a very durable structure made of one of the hardest rocks on Earth is still standing, well, eventually human population would move in and take advantage of that. And you can see in those cities where the Inca have made repairs, but they didn't make it the same way. They used smaller, different, easy to work stones to complete a wall or fix a damaged area. And that could be the pointing to. So an archaeologist doesn't know what they're looking at. They're going to assume that the people who are living there are the ones that constructed it. So it's taking it in context, even if they say they didn't. And you have that happening in a couple civilizations worldwide. The Inca have structures that they say they didn't build. You've got Pumapunku in Bolivia that the Aymara said they didn't build that, and nobody had the technology to make those andesite blocks the way they did. You have Teotihuacan that was already there according to the Aztecs, and even they don't know who built it. So you do have these things, but archaeologists assume in context because everything in the city dates from 1500 years ago, so it must have been the Inca, it must have been the Aztecs. And they say they didn't. Where if you go to Egypt and you look at the Great Pyramid, the Egyptians say, yeah, we built that. And it's clearly a completely different construction technique than this megalithic construction in the New World. Conversely, in Egypt, right next to the pyramid, by the Sphinx, there are structures that are megalithic that are similar to the construction styles of the New World, don't match the construction styles that the Egyptians were using in the Old Kingdom or in any kingdom, except maybe down south at the Osirian, which may be an older structure. So Egyptologists say, well, clearly the Sphinx and its complex were built with the pyramids, but it could be two different things. You can't always assume. If you don't know what you're looking at, they're just assuming that it's that contemporary culture. So that being said, what rabbit hole shall we go down? Well, let's consider this. Anatomically modern Homo sapien humans, according to current dating on remains that have been found worldwide, appear to have been on this planet for, at this point, at least 300,000 years. And modern archaeology and academia will tell us that basically the critical thinkers didn't show up until about 12,000 years ago. Well, that really doesn't make any sense. So these are anatomically modern humans 300,000 years ago. Same people, maybe just a little shorter, but same brain capacity, same brains, same ability to conceptualize, same problem-solving abilities. So what happened for the first 280,000 years? Until even maybe this lost Ice Age civilization showed up. So with that, let's take a look at modern civilization. So according to current teachings, the modern civilization really got started about 12,000 years ago. And in that time, we've gone from 12,000 years ago, looking around for rocks that might be useful to bang together and make tools, to now we have robots on Mars looking around at rocks to see if they might be useful. We've gone from maybe a couple people knowing the critical information to now pretty much anybody in the world has access to all the world's knowledge in a little magic piece of glass and aluminum. You know, as a civilization, we are on the cusp of a couple of milestones, at least in our mind. You got unlimited energy, very sophisticated autonomous machines, also known as artificial intelligence in the modern parlance, and interstellar travel. So 12,000 years, we've gone, in their minds, basically from cavemen to getting ready to go out and populate the galaxy. So if we look at that, that's 12,000 years. Same people were existing 200,000 years ago. Well, if we were hit by a comet strike before we got into interstellar space, it would cause global catastrophic devastation. The environment would be changed, land masses would be changed. The vast majority of plants and animals would be killed. And the survivors would immediately only be concerned about survival. Any other skill you have, computer programming, marketing, anything like that, is meaningless. It's only your ability to survive. And after an impact like that, it would take decades, maybe, for just the atmosphere and the seasons to recover to a point where nature could start to rebuild, and it could take centuries before plant and wildlife reaches a point where it could sustain even a sizable human population. Well, in that time, the only people who have been on the earth are only surviving, looking for food, shelter, and water, trying to wade through this destructive world. Well, you have to ask yourself, what exactly is going to be passed on knowledge-wise? Well, it really is dependent on who survives. there are some basic concepts that if people are telling stories of the good old days around the fire, if they have it, maybe we'll pass that on. But by the time you get to a point where there are enough humans, nature's recovered, the food chain's recovered, to where you're going to civilize it, it could take thousands of years. And by that time, whatever's left would be unrecognizable as a civilization. There'd be little things here and there to be salvaged, but if you don't know what it is, you don't know. And given another 1,000 years before a good civilization takes hold, and maybe 5,000 years, by then nobody has any clue that there was a civilization. Us existed before that. We live in a very disposable society. 99 of everything is going to be degraded within a couple thousand years. Even the plastics are going to be gone. There's nothing but dust and remnants of these things. And you give it another 100,000 years and nobody will ever know we existed at all. So if you go back, what if 150,000 years ago civilization took hold? You had a relatively safe time in the earth, because, you know, barreling through space like this, we're not exactly in the safest place in the galaxy. And what if the critical thinkers show up, discovered agriculture, started civilization? Well, instead of 12,000 years, what if they had 20,000 years of continuous civilization and advancement? 25,000. How far would they have gotten? Is it possible that a civilization rose, became very technologically sophisticated, and, you know, just because the way we do things doesn't necessarily mean that's the way a previous civilization would have done it, let alone any other civilization. So every problem has a solution, although it's not the same one. So the technology and the architecture, it may be slightly different. They may have discovered things that we have yet to discover. So let's say they reach the same point, let's say technologically, that we have today. And what if they went beyond that, where they did have unlimited energy and they did have, we'll say, artificially intelligent machines, and they did have interstellar travel? Well, what if their solution to the problem was to not send biological humans in to explore space? And they decided to do it totally by machine, because humans are fragile and machines you can make indestructible. Now let's just say they discovered, I think much like we're going to discover, that you cannot leave artificially intelligent machines to their own devices, okay? No matter how you program them, they still only act according to their programming and will only respond according to their programming. Usually yes, no, there's no real gray area, and they have their own logic. And let's say they discovered that no matter how hard you try, you cannot program consciousness into a machine. It will always be a mimic. It will always be a drone. And that they discovered that human consciousness, or consciousness of any kind, if you want to call it the soul, only occurs naturally. Okay? So let's just say their solution is to transfer human souls, once they've reached a certain age and level of maturity, they've been through life, into machine. Okay? And that way, that person who is now in a machine body that's indestructible, infinitely repairable, intelligence is recoverable and transferable, they're more or less immortal. Now those people go out into space with the drones, so they have the ultimate decision. Well, what advantage is having a human consciousness with these drones when you explore the universe? Well, they've been alive. They can recognize good and evil. They can pick up the social nuances. They may know what life is when they look at it. They can determine if somebody's hostile or if somebody's friendly. You know, think ultimate decisions that need to be with somebody who's had life experience, not just a drone who's been programmed. Okay? So they do this, and let's say a couple thousand people go off with their drones to explore the galaxy. And in this time, one of these cataclysms hits. Kablooey. Comets. Makes a rotation through the comet's tail. It's like hitting it with a celestial shotgun. It's worldwide destruction and devastation on an unbelievable. There wouldn't be a whole lot of survivors of that. Now, so you have these people who are out exploring the galaxy. They're more or less not biological, but they have human souls, and they lose communication with home one day. Now, who knows what technology they were using at the time, but it may take a century to get back home at full speed. Even though they're traveling faster than light, it's still, maybe they weren't going that fast. And by the time they get back, everything has been reduced to a small number of basically back to hunter-gatherer cavemen trying to survive. Well, now these people have an issue, don't they? Because they cannot create any more living machines. All they can create are drones because they don't have souls to inhabit them, okay? And all the souls on Earth, those human souls, are primitive. They have no concept of what's going on. They haven't gone through history. So they have a choice to make. What do? Do they try and breed their own? Do they show up and teach the primitives that are there? They may have tried that and decided that wasn't a good idea, that they need to just kind of let things occur naturally so that those souls reach a level to where they can continue on and reveal themselves. And it could take 100,000 years before that happens. And the reason I bring that up is if you're a pest control guy like me, or Dale from King of the Hill, your pest control guy is up on all the latest conspiracies. And I've heard that people in the know about extraterrestrials have said that the whole reason they're here is because to them we are like wine vessels for souls, for maturing souls. And that got me thinking. And then you have people like Joe Rogan saying, what if the point of all this is to create artificial life? Well, those two things could be linked together. It could be that what we're seeing in modern UFOs is actually our ancestors from maybe 150,000 years ago. They're not extraterrestrial at all. They keep watch, and when the civilization reaches a certain point, they might give it a little nudge in one way or the other. Maybe change their attitudes through interaction. There's a lot of war. People have to learn how to deal with completely ideologically different cultures, which is something you would need to know if you're going about the galaxy. How to recognize hostility, how to recognize friendly, how to compromise, maybe to give us a bend on colonialism, because if they had human colonies out in the universe, this wouldn't have been a problem. So now look at our history. We've learned how to colonize. What happens if you colonize a place where people are already there, and what are the repercussions of that? Also, how to defend against colonization. So current civilization could be a giant training academy. Meanwhile, our technology is pushing forward and we're getting a better understanding of the universe. So there you go. There's my rabbit hole. Maybe they're not extraterrestrials at all. Maybe they're machine drones from the past. People have been kidnapped, supposedly, have said that these little gray guys seem like they're robots, and a lot of times there's a taller, more humanoid being there that seems to be in charge, right? There might have been some actual extraterrestrials that have visited, but you don't know if these our ancestors that say, hey, leave them alone until we get them back up to where we can, get back out into the galaxy. So, hey, let me know in the comments what you think of my rabbit hole. I love it. Doesn't mean it's true, but it's fun to think about. Until next time, thanks for joining me on the porch for all my craziness. See you next time.